Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Thor Ragnarok. I think it probably goes without saying, but nobody really gives a fuck about the Thor movies, or really anticipates them other than that Marvel movie that I guess I'll see because it'll probably connect to something, even though when it does I usually forget about it, except for introducing Loki, which was pretty cool. Thor Ragnarok kind of realizes that you don't give a fuck about it, so they kind of just forget about the entire franchise and do this kind of farcical kind of thing directed by Taika Waititi. And that is a lot of fun. It's actually very refreshing as a Thor movie to actually see a Thor movie that, one, I wanted to see going into it, and also that ended up being pretty good, that I wouldn't mind actually seeing again. Thor: The Dark World I don't really remember, and the first Thor I don't remember liking, but this is an actual fun, very Marvel-y superhero movie, and almost in kind of a similar vein that you saw when early comic book movies where you had directors who kind of didn't take it seriously, like, this is a dumb thing for kids, and I'll make it in a very comic booky way and not sort of respect the medium and do it in a farcical way. We're not too many degrees from what people like Schumacher did, but the difference between what Taika Waititi did and Schumacher did, other than that this movie is good and his Batman movies suck really bad, is that he understood how to make it a farce by not also making fun of the characters, not making fun of the lore, not making fun of Marvel. He's actually very much respects it. You can tell that all throughout the design, how he treats the characters, how he actually treats Thor throughout this film, and Thor's comic book history, which is something I honestly didn't think the other two did very well. If you watch Thor: The Dark World and then read any comic books about Malekith, you'd honestly be surprised that they came out with Thor: The Dark World. In Thor Ragnarok, you can get a sense of Jack Kirby, Walt Simonson, Peter David in terms of the Hulk stuff, even the Planet Hulk storyline. So you're very much getting all that in there, even a Beta Ray Bill reference. You're getting all of that while this still feels like kind of a light, fun Marvel movie in the perfect way they do it. Almost so much so that it feels like they know how to do this a little too well. I was a little almost put off by it. It doesn't feel surprising they can resurrect the one franchise that no one's ever really liked from them and make it a really enjoyable film. I think this is probably go down as one of their more Guardians of the Galaxy in terms of approach influence kind of films that they've ever done, showing that the success of Guardians of the Galaxy kind of showed that they can basically take any characters, regardless of their brand recognition or how much the public knows about them, and make a really enjoyable, audience-pleasing movie. And Thor Ragnarok absolutely does that in the way similar to what Guardians of the Galaxy did. Now, Taika Waititi and James Gunn are not the same director, and I think what Taika Waititi does, and he fits so perfectly into Marvel, it's almost ridiculous. You almost want to think he had absolutely no control, but you also can tell his auteur voice is going all throughout it. He fits so well within the Marvel mode. It's shocking how well he does, but you can still tell Taika Waititi's there, particularly because the humor in this is great. It's probably the most fun Thor movie, although Thor: The Dark World, everyone says it's super dark and serious. I remember they did try to up the laughs in that, and that was a whole directorial mess anyway, whereas Thor Ragnarok does it to a ridiculous degree, but it fits within Marvel. Riffing and always making fun of each other is something that was even in the Marvel comics, so this fits incredibly well with Thor Ragnarok and Taika Waititi's style. Particularly, I think it is Chris Hemsworth's best showcase for him as a comedic actor, more so than all those comedies he did. It shows the chops that he's really had, but in lesser movies, finally applied to a movie that we actually all like. And the chemistry in this film is absolutely ridiculous. It shows someone like Taika Waititi, who very much cares about character in all of his comedies, work well with the studio, who very much cares about mainly the character of their heroes over everything else. And that works really well in Thor Ragnarok. Now, obviously, this does have Cate Blanchett as Hela, and that sort of works in the way that Marvel villains work, I guess. She is definitely having a lot of fun, letting a great actress kind of play in the way they're letting Cate Blanchett play in here is ridiculously fun to watch, but I often felt like he kind of favors, as a director, and Marvel Studios do in general, the story with the heroes, and I wanted to see them on the cool planet with Jeff Goldblum a lot more than I really cared about what happened in Asgard, and the whole Asgard plotline might be the biggest problem with it. Anytime this tries to go back to be kind of more of a Thor movie, I'm like, oh, that's cool, he wants to save everyone from Asgard this kind of like in a figurehead-y role, and because, you know, government responsibility. I get that, but at the same time, like, I don't really care about the people of Asgard, and I think like the whole idea going into this is that they knew you don't care about Thor, so let's like have a lot of fun and do this farce, because we couldn't probably get away with this with other characters. Other characters, you'd be complaining like, hey, they didn't do this, they didn't adapt this well, blah blah blah. I'm sure there are Thor fans, but like, I mean, I'm sure, probably, I don't really know any, but I don't think most people really honestly do care even that much, so they could do something like that. The idea of like kind of bringing this back and like showing off the franchise as a trilogy, it's not really a trilogy the way I think like the Captain America movies worked as a trilogy, and that the Iron Man movies were 3 of them. Thor kind of is kind of in the lesser of any of the Marvel franchises, and this is just sort of like a saving grace soft reboot in a lot of ways. If the first Thor movie had been like this, we would have all been singing the praises of Thor a long time ago, but it was always kind of the franchise we all sort of were just sort of stuck with in the MCU, this being the 17th Marvel movie, and the 3rd Thor movie is kind of just something like in a Marvel marathon we'd have to put up with. I didn't see any people marathoning the other 2 Thor movies before seeing this, and kind of one of those screening things that they usually do. It seemed like everyone was like, I mean, I think we're okay. We can just go into this. And you definitely can, but asking us as an audience to suddenly care about the franchise and the people of Asgard, I think is a little presumptive that we honestly care. It seems to like sort of want to have its cake and eat it too in terms of that plotline. Certainly, yes, Thor has to defend Asgard, I get that, but at the same time, I think a lot of that Hela stuff, you had Cate Blanchett in there to kind of justify having that storyline a lot more, because us as an audience would actually want to see her do that. Or at least me, I don't know about you. Maybe you hate Cate Blanchett and you're a horrible person, but I like Cate Blanchett, so I was fine going back to that. But ultimately, did it really work narratively as well, or was it even as enjoyable? I mean, I think it sort of was, but it didn't really work as much narratively. I could have just been stuck on this planet, and then they come back to Asgard and it's all fucked up and stuff. I think that would have been cooler, but you know, whatever, that's probably nitpicking. I particularly love the chemistry between Mark Ruffalo and Chris Hemsworth. Plays off people really well. He probably doesn't get enough credit for it, but I think particularly with what Mark Ruffalo does with the Hulk here, it's one of his better Hulk performances. He's always kind of the showstopper in all of the Marvel movies he's been in, both the Avengers movies and now this, and this is probably the funniest he's ever been. And even Tessa Thompson, who's someone who I've always really liked in everything I've seen her in. I haven't seen her in enough stuff. I've always really liked her, and her as an actress, she's really captivating and really fun to watch, and she's just a really great actress, and she was really fun as Valkyrie while also being able to play up the depressing moments as well. And even I noticed her kind of flashback thing, was that kind of sort of a reference to like the Zack Snyder-y influence in Wonder Woman, or am I just reading into that? It felt like a little, suddenly the MCU got a little Zack Snyder-y or something. Although I will say they did it a little better than, you know, Zack Snyder. I liked pretty much all the performances, from Jeff Goldblum to even Taika Waititi being a rock monster. The only one who oddly I didn't think was kind of it's kind of weird for him not to be the kind of main focus or the main thing I like about any of these movies is Tom Hiddleston. I thought probably gave one of his weaker Loki performances, although it was hilarious when he sees the Hulk and he gets like really scared because you realize he actually hasn't seen the Hulk since Avengers, and obviously he'd be nervous about that. Maybe it's because he wasn't as much of the focus. I still thought he was good. I generally like Tom Hiddleston, but it just felt like maybe of his Loki performances, probably his weakest, if I guess I was going to rank them in some weird thing or something. And I love the style of this, how Jack Kirby it really was. It looked like both Jack Kirby and heavy metal comics that were influenced by Jack Kirby, I guess. But it was colorful, it was bright, it was also 80s with a great score by Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo, believe it or not, which was like insane. And it's just very 80s in the right way, you know, in the kind of fantasy kind of milieu, but also kind of being very respectful of the comic book and its design. Jack Kirby was a big part of kind of the cosmic stuff, and particularly Thor, and it seemed to really want to go into that in terms of its design and all the aliens and everything that was going on, and particularly all the Walt Simonson stuff as well, which is what made the good parts of the Thor comics. I'm not a huge fan of them, but the things I've always taken away from them are all on display here. As much as the takeaway from this film should be how good Taika Waititi is with actors and how good he is at making you laugh and everything like that, he's also impeccable at using design within the Marvel Universe. I would probably credit this more to him, as this hasn't really been a showcase of any of the others. It might feel a little Guardians of the Galaxy to you, but a lot of, like, particularly like Thor's room in the Jeff Goldblum planet or whatever, felt very Jack Kirby to me, and I absolutely love that about it. It's probably the most Jack Kirby Marvel movie, and, you know, this is the 17th one, so it's about that goddamn time. The Thor movies took themselves seriously because fantasy films were taken seriously, and I get that. But I think what this film does is kind of the smartest way to do a farce in the modern Marvel and superhero movie universe. Is that it's not making fun of fantasy films. You want to do that, watch Your Highness or something, and this isn't Your Highness. It is funny within that world. If you watch Taika Waititi's other film, What We Did in the Shadows, as much as it is making fun of vampires, it's actually very respectful of vampires and vampire history, and that each character is a different kind of vampire from vampire literature. It's actually someone who has amazing respect for what he's actually having a lot of fun with, which is something I've noticed more and more directors are able to do, but Taika Waititi probably did with something that no one has been able to adapt as well in a more serious way, but also is able to have fun with. It's really kind of a remarkable job he does here. I think when Marvel's doing with their films is like they're so good at making these really fun, funny superhero movies that I almost find it a little too good at it, like almost like Pixar in their prime or something like that, where you're like, oh, okay, cool, they made another good Marvel movie, big shocker. I mean, there hasn't really been that many like really horrible ones. There might not be as many like great standout ones if you really think about it. In this, it kind of felt like they're almost so much on autopilot in terms of like they know how to get this shit to work that it's sort of unfair. They saved the franchise that no one thought they could get to work. And maybe if most people had extended universes, they wouldn't bother doing, but Marvel isn't that way. They both respect the characters. They want to do these trilogy things for whatever reason, but they also like want to try to make a good movie. And you could see that also with, you know, Spider-Man was pretty much like the MCU does Spider-Man, and this is pretty much the MCU saves Thor. It shows how good MCU is with character and making those characters enjoyable and fun. And they've learned a lot of lessons from Guardians of the Galaxy to Captain America and so forth. I would say this franchise doesn't play in the same way as Captain America. I've heard people compare this to Winter Soldier as like they didn't love First Avenger and then they bring him back with this amazing second movie or an amazing sequel. I think the difference between the Captain America franchise and this is those films all play off of each other. Winter Soldier and the original First Avenger Captain America play off of each other in a very distinct way thematically. The Thor movies are kind of like, you had this first one directed by Kenneth Branagh, we had the second one which I think was Alan Taylor and was a bit of a mess, and then we have this third one that's like its own thing and it's funny and it's like sort of Guardians of the Galaxy, I guess. It like doesn't connect at all. They're just kind of three movies, but it's almost like Thor Ragnarok gets that. They're not trying to sort of save the film. I mean, they have cameos from like his various like buddies. At one point they make a reference that Jane Foster and him broke up, I guess. The girl who fought with him is like instantly just gone. I mean, there's just like a lot of stuff they don't even care about. They understand what is important and what isn't, and honestly a lot of that didn't bug me, but also, you know, most of us don't give a fuck about Thor, so that probably works for it. Thor Ragnarok is kind of showing what they understand you as an audience will put up with these characters, and they have a lot of fun with it while still being amazingly respectful, while also feeling maybe a little disrespectful and loose and farcical. I wouldn't say this is a full farce, it's more of like a farce way to make a Thor movie. It's kind of like a Thor movie made in kind of a farcical way. It definitely shows the evolution of comic book movies, as MCU movies often do, particularly the evolution of them as a studio, which seems to be kind of like almost like unimaginable compared to where like superheroes movies were 20 years ago, where the MCU has taken it in like 8 years. It's just crazy. Or 9 years? Oh shit, 9 years, I guess. And kind of primes you to the fact that like this is an amazing achievement at this point, that they're easy to make like really good populist, like big explosion, tentpole, huge merchandising bonanzas, but they're, you know, we all really love them. And I think Thor Ragnarok plays in that way and wants to be that enjoyable, fun, lovable MCU movie. And that reminds me what's so great about the MCU and what is great about Thor Ragnarok is it is able to have fun with itself, but is also able to be a fun Marvel movie despite the fact that it's a Thor movie and most of us aren't really that excited for these things. This is the only way they probably could have got us all to come out for one of these things, but it also shows that they understand that they're not trying to take us for granted. They understand that they have to actually make an enjoyable movie, which is kind of shocking for a franchise that no one's really liked, that they learned from their mistakes and have also learned from their successes and what made them work. And Thor Ragnarok very much shows that, while also letting Taika Waititi show his auteur voice through it, which is kind of amazing. I will won't say that Thor Ragnarok is one of my favorite Marvel movies. I think maybe the praise for it is going a little too far. It tries to focus on being a normal sort of Thor movie, although it does it better than any of the other ones. And especially like the whole thing with his people living in a cave with a door that looks exactly like it's from Lord of the Rings, I wasn't really that attached to. But I still had a really great time, and yes, it's the best Thor movie, you know, we all know it. We knew it going in it would be, and it is. It shows me kind of the enjoyable fun that I can depend on with the MCU continues to be dependable, and Thor Ragnarok maybe shows that better than any franchise, that they are able to be so dependable they can make their less dependable and quality franchise be actually enjoyable for once. So if you have seen Thor Ragnarok and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.